Hello and welcome to the radiotimes.com Doctor Who podcast. My name's Hugh, and this week I am joined once again by radiotimes.com gaming editor Rob Lean. Hello, Rob.
Hello, Hugh. How's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. Thanks for joining us again. The fans were clamoring. They were like, "Oh, give us more Rob. We hate that other guy. Oh, he's terrible." No, they weren't really. We like to keep things fresh here, get different people on. And Rob is such a big Doctor Who fan, but it seemed like a perfect opportunity to bring him back. Though this time we're not talking about gaming. We are talking about Big Finish, I suppose. We usually have the obligatory Big Finish mention a bit later in the show, but this week we're talking all about the Ninth Doctor Adventures, which is one of the big new projects coming out of Big Finish. Yeah, Rob, I don't know if you saw about this, but obviously it was one of the biggest news stories for Doctor Who fans last year was Christopher Eccleston coming back to play Doctor Who for these audio adventures. And Morgan and I talked about this at the time, but you weren't working with us yet. So, I mean, as a fan, did that excite you?
Yeah, I think it is really exciting. I was watching quite closely. I think it was back in the days when events and things were still going on. Because I remember there was a big deal. I can't remember which Comic Con or event that it was, but there was a big deal that Christopher Eccleston's kind of gone to a Comic Con.
Yeah, yeah.
Twitter was awash that day with pictures of him having like a lovely time with fans. And all these nice quotes were coming out from it. And I think it was a while after that when the announcement came that he was coming back to do some Big Finish audios. And yeah, it was very exciting because I kind of thought, if he was going to ever come back, that would have happened for the 50th anniversary. And obviously they just kind of cut around where he should have been. But no, it's very exciting to have him back.
And obviously, since Morgan and I first talked about it, there's been some news on that front. On the anniversary of Rose, the 16th anniversary of Rose, the first episode we obviously saw the Ninth Doctor in. They released the trailer for Ravagers, which is the first, I think, volume of these Doctor stories. I get a bit confused with Big Finish, organization. I think there's it's like a series, but there's volumes and there's different stories within the volumes. I don't know, it's very Doctor Who to be very confusing about how it all lies out. But I think, yeah, so we heard him in action for the first time. And it was quite interesting because I thought, weirdly, he didn't sound like how I remembered. I'm sure he is the same. And obviously Christopher Eccleston's, it's a few years on since he played the Doctor. But I was a bit like, that's definitely Christopher Eccleston, but is it the Doctor? I'm sure that in situ, it'll sound great, but that was my first instinct. And since that trailer came out, we've had even more news, which is quite exciting. So part of the reason we're talking about this today is that a few days ago, on Monday, it broke that the Ninth Doctor is going to face the Cybermen, dun dun dun, in one of his stories. And the reason this is significant is because Christopher Eccleston obviously wasn't in the job for very long. When he was in Doctor Who, he was there for 13 episodes, and he did manage to squeeze in, Autons and Daleks, and a few other things. But, he never met the Master. He never met the Cybermen. There's quite a few classic Doctor Who monsters that he never faced off with, So the Cybermen is something that fans have been talking about for him for quite a while, right? So it's quite interesting. And there's a bit of a filmy twist for this as well. And Rob, you said you were going to brush off your film studies to explain the filmy twist to our listeners.
Yeah, some 10 years ago, I did a film studies degree, shout out University of Southampton. And yeah, it was when I was reading on radiotimes.com just now about the fact that Christopher Eccleston will be facing the Cybermen in a story inspired by or kind of linked to the 1927 film Metropolis. That just set my film studies brain awhir, because I think we did a German cinema and a sci-fi cinema module, and I think Metropolis was quite a big part of both of them. But yeah, I assume that this will be one of those times when the Doctor and his adventures kind of inadvertently inspire a piece of real life pop culture, because there is a robot called Maria in Metropolis who, even if you haven't seen the film, you'll probably recognize the robot if you Google it. Which has been very kind of influential. I think it was one of the first robots on film. I think it inspired Ralph McQuarrie's C-3PO design in particular on the Star Wars side, and looks kind of enough like a Cyberman that, yeah, you could have a Cyberman walks past the window of Fritz Lang's office and then he goes, that's the idea. So I'm assuming there'll be something like that happens.
Oh yeah, that's the classic, the classic celebrity historical thing of the Doctor secretly inspires them to do the thing that they're already famous for.
Yeah, yeah, not diminishing anyone's achievements at all, but it was really the fact there was a Cyberman running around here.
Yeah, no, it's kind of fun. And it's something, like I said, that fans have been keen for a while. It was, I think, when Morgan and I first talked about this sort of series, it was like, what, narrative opportunities are there? And there are things like you get to see the Ninth Doctor facing off with these monsters that he maybe hasn't faced off with before. And another interesting quirk is that it's been confirmed that this series is specifically set before Rose. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the case for absolutely every Ninth Doctor thing Big Finish will ever do, assuming Christopher Eccleston wants to carry on beyond this first run, which goes out from May, I think, of this year until February of next year at the moment. But yeah, I don't know whether he'll carry on. Maybe future series could be set. Maybe Billy Piper would get involved. Maybe it'd be set between episodes. Maybe you could set it in that bit at the end of episode 1 where he goes away in the TARDIS and then he comes back again. He goes, oh, wait, did I mention it travels in time? Who knows how many years passed in that brief second from his perspective? You never know. I think they have written a couple of sort of spin-off stories before set in that period. But yeah, these are specifically set before Rose. So then that does limit slightly the sort of stories you can tell. So for example, you kind of can't really give him a full-fledged companion because we know he didn't really have one before Rose, or it's implied that he didn't really travel around with anyone before her. And also with things like you can't really have him meet the Daleks because he met the Daleks again for the first time in Dalek, and then they see them again at the end of a series. He doesn't go, yeah, oh yeah, remember we've seen them about 6 times since Van Statten's basement. Oh yeah, we're always seeing the Daleks, aren't we? No, it's seen as a surprise, and then he dies and regenerates into David Tennant. So you are limited with some monsters, but in the case of the Cybermen, there was kind of a loophole. And similarly, they've also announced that he's going to meet the Brigadier. Obviously, Nicholas Courtney passed away a few years ago, in 2010, I think. But they've got John Coleshaw playing the Brigadier, the impressionist and actor. And so I think he's played him for a while now. And it's kind of another little thing you can do is there's nothing to say the Ninth Doctor didn't meet the Brigadier. A lot of classic series Doctors did. It's suggested that some of the modern series Doctors might have. So yeah. I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it? I mean, how do you feel about these sort of series, filling in gaps like that? Do you think that's something that's fun, or do you think that there's a point where you kind of got to leave a little bit of mystery?
Yeah, I think it is fun. I was wondering when they announced it, when will it fit in the timeline? Because there aren't, or it didn't seem like there were that many gaps. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, which I might be, but I had been under the impression that at the start of Rose that there's meant to be a slight implication, or fans have read into it a slight implication that he's just regenerating, he sees a reflection of his ears for the first time and things like that.
That's a point. Yeah, it does seem to imply that it's relatively new to him, but maybe he just, in every episode of this, he goes, oh no, I really need to find a mirror. Oh, still haven't seen myself. Oh no, more aliens in a different place. Oh, I guess I'll put that off for a bit. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's definitely implied, and if that's something that they're choosing to ignore, that's fine. But it also will, in hindsight, make him just look weirdly vain. I don't, I don't know. But yeah, no, it's a funny quirk, that, and I don't know whether there's going to be any other, slight issues, because I feel like you said, it's definitely implied, right, that this is all quite new to him in this body.
Yeah, I think it is. I haven't watched Rose in a while, but yeah, I think there's definitely a bit where it might be in the Rose Tyler's family's flat. There's a bit where he's in the bathroom and he looks in the mirror and kind of guffaws at his own impression, his own face for the first time.
But, yeah, he's like, oh, could have been worse, but look at the ears. It's something like that, yeah. which is a classic little bit of post-regeneration self-deprecation, as the little rhyme goes, which I've just made up. But yeah, I do think that's a fair point. It's interesting to see how they're going to fit all this around. I also guess they couldn't bring the Master in. They often have ex-Masters appearing in these Big Finish things. Michelle Gomez has done loads. They've got Eric Roberts now. John Sims started doing them. Obviously, they have some of the classic series Doctors, and often they have impressionists for classic series Doctors as well. Peter Pratt, I think, has done some as his sort of master. But it's definitely suggested in Sound of Drums, whatever Utopia, that the Doctor hasn't seen the Master since the Time War. So unless they kind of have some really weird, oh, you'll forget at the end of this thing, which they do quite a lot, I would imagine, in these sort of things. I'm not quite sure how that'd fit. It must be a real challenge, actually, like doing these things, because we've seen, like, obviously a lot of these Ninth Doctor adventures can just be kind of standalone, right? Like, there's nothing to say he didn't go to some planet, saw there was some trouble and help someone out, and then just like left at the end of it. Like, there are plenty of places where, like, it's suggested we don't see all the all the adventures the Doctor goes on. Like, they have sometimes references to things that we haven't seen, even within series. Oh, we were just at this other planet, the planet of hopping or whatever. But it's kind of like, it must be particularly difficult with the Christopher Eccleston series, which is very much, a lot of it is presented quite consecutively. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like, from Rose to the end of the world to when they do the Unquiet Dead, and then they do Aliens of London, it's quite like like, it's not suggested they really go anywhere in between. So it must have been a real challenge for them.
Yeah, definitely. And I liked what you suggested as well about that gap towards the end of Rose where he kind of pops off. I would love if they just revealed that he had like 20 box sets worth of adventures before he realized, hey, I didn't mention that it also travels in whichever one he didn't say the first time.
Oh, did I say it also travels in time? Like, yeah, he's like, oh, man, I still regret that girl I met 20 years ago. Never saying. And someone goes like, oh, wow, a time machine. Goes, oh, you know what? I'll have another stab at that. See what happens. Yeah, no, I think, I mean, it's slightly facetious, but I could see it happening. I mean, in every other case, it's kind of like, you could, I suppose, get like Billie Piper back, and she's done some of these Big Finish things before with David Tennant, so she might be up for it. I don't know, she might not. But I think then I'm not really sure where you'd fit stuff in. Like, I think they definitely do have adventures, again, even within this series, that you don't see. But I don't think they have loads. I don't think there's like a lot of space where you could fit it in. Like, especially if you had John Barrowman as well, then maybe, because it's suggested between The Empty Child, The Doctor Dances, and Boomtown that they've been on some adventures. And then again, between Boomtown and the finale, they're like, they just get in from an adventure. And it would be classic Big Finish style to like say, oh, that adventure they just got in from that is like named in the main series as like, oh, we just ran away from this army, to like show that. That's pretty solid Big Finish stuff. But I'm guessing, for this first one, you've got Christopher Eccleston, you've got the Ninth Doctor, that's your selling point. You don't necessarily want to involve Billie Piper, John Barrowman, Annette Badland, whoever, like all these extra kind of like people. You kind of are like, what's the Ninth Doctor series we want to see? And it is also like, the Ninth Doctor was only ever seen with Rose, but any other Doctor tends to have more than one companion beyond. I mean, even Paul McGann through Big Finish has had lots of other companions. They have these other experiences, they have adventures. It's kind of like, how can we expand the Ninth Doctor's 13 episode run in a way that kind of fits? I guess the challenge is going to be where it technically fits, and then where it feels natural. Because if it feels forced, I feel like that could be like, if he does go off and have 20 years of adventures in that little gap, then that might feel a bit forced. And similarly, if they keep coming up with reasons for why that line about his ears makes sense, that could feel a bit forced. That said, I'm pretty excited. I mean, I'll definitely listen in. How about you?
Yeah, I'm excited as well. Definitely tune in. And I think it will be nice to see him interact with the Cybermen. And I was just trying to think then if there's any.
Well, hear him interact with the Cybermen.
Yeah, I can picture it in my mind's eye, him interacting with the Cybermen. But yeah, I don't think there's anything when the Cybermen do turn up in the David Tennant years that kind of causes a problem for them being here.
I don't think so. He like name checks them in Dalek. There's a Cyberman head in a box, and he goes like, and Rose is like, oh, is it an old friend? He goes, oh, it's an old enemy, but it's sad to see them like this, or something like that. So it sort of implies it's been a while, but it doesn't. That's sort of me inferring it, I guess, more than anything. Like, you could say, oh yeah, he saw them, like a year ago in his personal timeline. I guess also, with things like, I'd have to check the episodes, which I'm sure they would do at Big Finish pretty carefully. But things like the Sontarans or the Silurians, it's kind of like, I don't think they say, oh, I haven't seen them since I was, whoever, like since the classic series, essentially.
Yeah.
I don't think they explicitly say that. With the Daleks, it is quite specifically like, I haven't seen you since the Time War, and the Ninth Doctor exists after the Time War, is what the kind of Day of the Doctor explained. Weirdly, if the Day of the Doctor didn't exist, they might not have had such a problem, because there was, I think the original idea was that the Ninth Doctor was the Doctor that fought in the Time War. And then they invented the War Doctor because Christopher Eccleston wouldn't do Day of the Doctor, more or less, because he didn't fancy it. And now it's kind of like that fact has made it more difficult for them to put the Ninth Doctor back in, because they've shaved off what would have been quite, you could have done the Ninth Doctor fighting the Time War stories ad infinitum, but obviously now that's kind of been ruled out, because we know they stopped the war, the three of them, in the Day of the Doctor, and then John Hurt's Doctor thinks that he killed everyone, but actually he doesn't, and then he flies off at the end and regenerates into Christopher Eccleston on camera.
Yeah.
So it kind of like, they really are cutting back at like the little bits of I don't know, the wiggle room.
Yeah, you've just reminded me as well that there's some stock footage of Eccleston in the bit in Day of the Doctor where all of the Doctors show up to put Gallifrey in a bubble.
I think he's the only one where it's like they have proper footage as well, because most of the others are like they're on screens doing something or other, and then they cut to him going, "And for my next trick," which is like something it's just taken from Parting of the Ways, I think, or Bad Wolf. Like it's just like really directly taken from that. I'm like, was there not a deleted scene or something? Like it's like he does the exact same thing in the exact same way. It's quite funny. I mean, this is me being very, 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 very nerdy, but yeah, no, it is funny. It's nice that they included him, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. I think this is probably one of the biggest things Big Finish has had in the pipeline for a long time. Obviously, it was exciting to have David Tennant back, when they got like John Sim in, all these kind of things, Alex Kingston. They do get a lot of great people, but because for so long, Christopher Eccleston really did not do Doctor Who stuff. He left the series, kind of didn't talk about it much. He did the odd thing for fans, and then he kind of warmed up enough to kind of go and do this, this convention circuit thing where he like actually realized how much the fans kind of still loved his interpretation. And I think it kind of helped heal some of the like negative experiences that he had making it, which he's talked about kind of at length. And I think that's kind of helped him kind of come to terms with it a bit and be like, I can kind of leave behind some of the negativity that like I faced, and I can bring that character back. And it's kind of, this is sort of special because it's kind of the Ninth Doctor has been a finite resource of, very limited expression. And all of a sudden we're getting much more of him. And, I'm sure the novelty will wear off by about, season 6, volume 8 of the Ninth Doctor Adventures. It will be a bit more like, oh yeah, whatever. Like when they first got Tom Baker to do Big Finish, it was a big deal, but like, you kind of get used to it. But yeah, no, for now I'm pretty excited. And, I'm excited, like you said, to see/hear, him face off with the Cybermen and meet the Brigadier. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, me too. And do you think this increases or decreases maybe the chances of him ever showing up on TV again as the Doctor? Obviously, Christopher Eccleston's on TV all the time.
he's pretty busy. He said on Lorraine, I believe, last year, he'd do it when hell freezes over. But we'll take that because in Doctor Who, hell probably has frozen over at some point. No, I think we can I think it's more likely. I don't think it's less likely, because it kind of like opens the door a bit. When Alex Kingston did Big Finish again before she came back in 2015, and that had been, I mean, it wouldn't have been a very long time, but that had been a couple of years she'd been out. I mean, it's not really comparable, but she'd kind of done it. And I think sometimes there has been a thing where someone's done, if people are doing Big Finish, it implies a kind of willingness to play the character, right? If they're not completely sick of it. Obviously, it's a lot less time consuming. You can record Big Finish whenever you want on your own. These days, you can probably do it at home if you need to, although I think they got Eccleston into the studios. If you kind of just want to do a couple of days recording, that's what you do. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a full production where you have like a million different things to worry about. But I do think, like I said, it denotes a willingness to play the character. And, maybe after a little while of him doing that, and he's like, oh, this is nice, I'm enjoying this. If, say, the 60th anniversary rolls around, Chris Chibnall comes cap in hand saying, please, Mr. Eccleston, can we have some more? He might be more into it. He might still say no. He said no before. He might just still be like, no, thanks. It's also, he has previously said like some of it is he didn't like the way he was treated by the BBC and stuff. Then there's a little bit of like awkwardness there. But he has worked with the BBC since, or at least on shows independently produced that have aired on the BBC, which is a distinction that I guess you could make. I don't think viewers would really notice the difference, but Doctor Who is produced in-house by the BBC, so there could be some reason there, but he doesn't want to do it. But he also, I think, has said, with the Day of the Doctor, the version of a script he got, which was quite different to what was on screen, he wasn't convinced enough to kind of overlook his reservations to do it. So possibly if they come to him with a good enough script, with some of this stuff, kind of some of his negativity has faded away, I could see it happening. I think it's, to be fair, it's it seems a bit impossible, but a lot of things that I would have thought were impossible in Doctor Who terms have happened recently. They got John Barrowman back twice, which is crazy. He hadn't been in it for over 10 years. That's crazy. They, Christopher Eccleston coming back to do Doctor Who Big Finish. I would not have bet on that in a million years. I really thought he was just done and dusted with it. People who really loved it and had really much more positive experiences, I would say Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi, they haven't come back and done Big Finish. Do you know what I mean? It's not a thing everybody does. So that's a very long-winded answer of saying maybe. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I'm the same as you. I think the 60th anniversary looms over a lot of fan theories and predictions about all manner of Doctor Who things, doesn't it? I think that's when they might ask, I reckon. I don't think they would have a reason before then to do it necessarily.
Yeah, that feels like the excuse, doesn't it? And also because they didn't get him for, the 50th, it would be a kind of obviously you'd also have there's been doctors since, so if you could get all the modern doctors, including him, that would be a bit of a coup. But even if he just had a little cameo, kind of like Tom Baker did, that would be quite cool. But again, yeah, it's just hard to know. Also, it's hard to know if they're going to make a big deal of the 60th anyway. We've discussed this on the podcast before, but it's a big deal for fans because it's kind of an arbitrary way, let's do this. But 50 years is a lot. 60 years is it's a decade. It's an extra 10. It's something that I'm sure will be commemorated in some way. I'm not sure if it will be commemorated with, a feature-length special, a biopic, a special online episode starring Paul McGann, a spin-off by Peter Davison, about trying to get in the movie, and a million other things. I'm not sure there'll be quite the same rigmarole around the 60th. I hope there is, because that would be great, and it would be cool to see Christopher Eccleston in live action again. But if all we get is this Big Finish stuff, and maybe even just this one collection of volumes, there's about 4 or 5 volumes, so it's quite a lot. I'd be happy with that. It would feel like the Ninth Doctor got more of his due, similarly to how Paul McGann had one movie, right? And now he's technically the longest serving Doctor of all time because he's still playing him now. He was also the default Doctor for a long time, in that Christopher Eccleston hadn't turned up yet. He's done the most Doctor Who stories, I think, of any Doctor by doing Big Finish, and people love him. It's kind of it's not the same as being the star of a TV show, which has a wider reach, but these Big Finish things, people love them, fans love him, and I think that would be a nice way for Eccleston to continue his Doctor Who story.
Fine.
Yeah. But what do you think, people listening at home? You may not be at home. Maybe you're in the park with your friends, because you're allowed to do that now. At time of recording, check your local regulations. Regulations may vary. Would you like to see Christopher Eccleston back in the main series? Are you excited to see him take on the Cybermen, which is the big news, and meet the Brigadier? And what else do you think the Big Finish series could fit in? Could he meet the Sontarans? I don't think that would be ruled out. Why not? Any other classic Doctor Who monsters you think would just about get away with? And, would you like to see him team up with Billy Piper again? Please let us know. We'll be back next week with another RadioTimes.com Doctor Who podcast. Until then, I've been Hugh.
And I've been Rob.
And this has been us. And now we're off to fight the Cybermen as well, because everyone's having a go. Goodbye.